A quiet BBC studio. No audience, no laughter to soften the edges. Just two women on a curved sofa under cold, perfect lights. One trained to control the story, the other trained to dismantle it. Meghan Markle arrived expecting a carefully framed conversation. Victoria Derbyshire arrived with notes, timelines, and one simple rule. If the answer doesn't match the record, she will ask again. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, Meghan would realize something too late. On Newsnight, there's nowhere to hide. The studio looked calmer than the headlines ever did. A crescent-shaped gray sofa wrapped around a glossy circular table that glowed faintly from underneath. Magenta light bleeding into the polished surface like a quiet warning. Two blue mugs sat untouched, placed with the kind of symmetry that only happens when producers are trying to make tension look like balance. Behind them, enormous screens pulsed with abstract blues and purples. In the center, the word Newsnight floated like a verdict. No audience, no applause sign, no room to win the room. Only microphones, cameras, and the truth, whatever shape it decided to take tonight. Meghan sat on the left curve of the sofa. Her posture was immaculate, shoulders back, chin level, the controlled poise of someone who had practiced being photographed since before the doors opened. She wore a fitted cream-tone top with a clean neckline and a deep blue skirt that fell elegantly to her knees. Tall black boots grounded the look, polished enough to suggest she thought about every angle, including the one where she stood up and left. Victoria Derbyshire sat opposite on the right curve, dressed in a crisp white dress with short sleeves, a pen resting between her fingers like a calm extension of her hand. A small stack of notes sat beside her. Not dramatic, not messy, just prepared. The BBC floor manager's voice was soft but decisive. "We're rolling in 5. Meghan's eyes flicked briefly toward a camera. A half smile appeared. Practiced, presentable, distant. Victoria didn't look at the camera at all. She looked at Meghan. 4. Meghan adjusted her hands on her lap, fingers interlaced, stillness a strategy. 3. Victoria's expression held a polite warmth that didn't reach the part of her eyes that asked questions for a living. 2. Meghan inhaled slow and measured. 1. A red light blinked on. Victoria's voice entered the silence with the exact tone audiences trusted. Clear, calm, unhurried. "Good evening. I'm Victoria Derbyshire. Tonight on Newsnight, an extended interview with Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, on public scrutiny, personal narratives, and the power of media in shaping lives." Meghan nodded once, as if accepting the premise. Victoria turned slightly toward her, still calm. "Meghan, thank you for joining us." "Thank you for having me," Meghan replied, her voice smooth, not overly friendly, not hostile, controlled. Victoria gave a small smile. "There's no studio audience tonight, no distractions, just a conversation." Meghan's eyes held hers. "That's good. Conversations are where truth actually lives when they're allowed to." The line landed softly, but it carried a blade in the velvet. Victoria didn't flinch. "Let's start with something simple. You've spoken often about feeling misrepresented. If you could correct one misconception the public has about you, just one, what would it be?" The question was open, generous, even a softball designed to invite reflection. Meghan's smile tightened at the edges. "That I'm difficult," she said almost immediately. "It's a label people use when a woman doesn't accept the version of herself others prefer." Victoria nodded slowly, acknowledging without endorsing. "And why do you think that label stuck?" Meghan's gaze sharpened, still polite, but suddenly awake. "Because it was useful," she said, "to the tabloids, to the institution, to anyone who benefited from making me smaller." Victoria kept her voice steady. "When you say the institution, you mean the royal household." "I mean a system," Meghan replied, careful but firm. "A machine designed to protect itself. And yes, that includes the royal household." Victoria let a beat of silence pass, enough time for the viewers at home to feel the weight of it. Then she leaned in slightly, almost conversational. "On Newsnight, we have to be precise. When you say machine, are you talking about individuals or structures? Because those are different claims." Meghan's smile returned, cooler now. "I'm talking about the lived experience," she said. "And frankly, Victoria, the obsession with precision can be a way of avoiding the point. The first real spark, not an explosion, just the faint sound of a match." Victoria's expression stayed neutral, but her pen stopped moving. Sometimes precision is how we keep fairness, she replied. It's also how we keep accountability. Meghan's eyes narrowed just slightly. Accountability goes both ways. Victoria accepted that without argument. It does. Which is why I want to ask something you've said repeatedly. Being silenced. Meghan's posture remained perfect, but her shoulders tightened like a silent door closing. Victoria continued, her tone still polite. You've described feeling silenced while also speaking in major interviews, producing content, issuing public statements, and running initiatives. People watching might wonder, how do those two realities fit together? Meghan blinked once slowly, then she smiled again, but this time it looked less like gratitude and more like restraint. Because you can speak, she said, and still be silenced. Victoria nodded. Explain what you mean. Meghan leaned forward slightly, hands still composed, refusing to give the cameras any messy movement to feed on. When you speak and people decide they won't hear you, when they cut the context, distort the intention, question your sanity, reduce you to a headline, she paused, letting the words hang. That's a form of silencing. Victoria held her gaze. And you believe that's what happened to you. I don't believe it, Meghan corrected. I lived it. There it was, the first clipped edge in her voice, the beginning of impatience. Victoria didn't react emotionally. She reacted structurally like an interviewer building a bridge plank by plank. Okay, she said. Let's take one example. Your relationship with the British press. Meghan's eyes brightened with alertness, as if she'd been waiting for this. Victoria continued. You've described certain coverage as cruel and relentless. At the same time, critics say you and Harry have pursued visibility in ways that keep the cycle alive. Interviews, projects, public statements. How do you respond to the claim that visibility has sometimes been a choice? Meghan's smile faded completely. That claim, she said, is the kind of false equivalence that keeps abuse polite. Victoria didn't blink. You're calling scrutiny abuse. I'm calling targeted harassment what it is, Meghan replied, voice sharper now. And I'm calling the framing of you chose this what it is, a way of blaming people for being harmed. A pause. Victoria set the pen down carefully like she didn't want even the sound of plastic to break the moment. Meghan, she said, still calm. I want to be careful here, but we also have a responsibility to challenge narratives when there are contradictions. Meghan's chin lifted. Contradictions, she repeated, tasting the word. Or complexities. Victoria's answer came without a blink. Sometimes both, but tonight we'll test which one applies. Meghan stared at her for a long beat, the studio suddenly feeling colder despite the glowing table. Then she gave a small nod like she'd accepted a duel. All right, she said softly. Test it. Victoria returned the nod, equally controlled. Let's talk about timelines, she said. The word timelines didn't sound aggressive, but it hit Meghan like a warning bell. Her hands tightened together in her lap, still neat, but no longer relaxed. Victoria glanced down at her notes for the first time, then back up. In previous public statements, you've described the point when you realized you were unsafe mentally and emotionally. You've also described when you asked for help. I want to walk through that sequence carefully because different versions have been presented over time. Meghan's eyes sharpened, her voice stayed low. Different versions, she said, or different moments being selectively quoted. Victoria didn't rise to it. She kept her tone level. That's exactly what we're going to find out. A silence stretched, thin and electric. The camera held both women in the same frame. Two immaculate figures on a gray sofa surrounded by bright screens and a glowing table, as if the set itself was designed to look modern while something ancient. Power, reputation, survival played out in real time. Meghan's smile returned for a split second, not warmth armor. Victoria's expression remained steady, not cruel, not sympathetic, just committed. Let's begin, Victoria said, and Meghan realized too late that this wasn't an interview where she could redirect with emotion. This was Newsnight, and Newsnight didn't follow feelings. It followed the record. The lights didn't change between segments. That was the thing about Newsnight. No dramatic reset, no musical sting to soften what came next. Just the same cool studio, the same glowing table, the same two women. Now fully aware that the polite phase was over, Victoria didn't rush. She never rushed. She let the silence do what it always did, make people uncomfortable enough to fill it. Meghan noticed, her posture stayed elegant, but there was a new rigidity to it, like a porcelain figure that could crack if handled the wrong way. Her eyes tracked Victoria closely now, no longer glancing toward the cameras. Victoria lifted her notes again. "Let's talk about timing," she said calmly, "because timing matters when we're trying to understand cause and effect." Meghan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You've said that you began struggling significantly during your pregnancy," Victoria continued. "You've also said you reached out for help and were turned away. Can you tell us clearly when that request happened?" Meghan exhaled through her nose, controlled but audible. "It happened when I realized I was drowning," she said. "When I couldn't see a way forward without intervention," Victoria nodded. "And who did you reach out to?" Meghan hesitated. "Not long, just enough. People within the system," she said. "People who are supposed to protect me." Victoria's voice remained even. "Names matter here." Meghan's eyes flashed. "No," she said, "they don't. Not when the system itself is the problem." Victoria didn't push immediately. She let that answer sit, then leaned forward slightly. "Here's why I'm asking," she said. "Because contemporaneous accounts from palace staff suggest a different sequence of events. They say concerns were raised earlier and that discussions did take place." Meghan's head tilted, her expression sharpening into something colder. "Palace staff," she repeated. "Anonymous sources." Victoria met her gaze. "Some of them are on record." A flicker, not panic, but irritation. "On record according to whom?" Meghan asked. "Institutions that have every incentive to rewrite history." Victoria didn't take the bait, she took the facts. According to internal communications reviewed during subsequent inquiries, she said, "I'm not assigning blame. I'm trying to establish clarity." Meghan leaned back slightly, crossing her legs with deliberate composure. "Clarity," she said, "or control." Victoria's reply was immediate. "Accuracy?" The word landed hard. Meghan's lips pressed together. For the first time since the interview began, she didn't answer right away. Victoria continued, voice still calm. "You've spoken powerfully about mental health. Many people listening tonight have had similar experiences. What they often ask is not whether pain was real, but whether all the facts were presented." Meghan's voice when it came was sharper. "I don't owe the public a forensic breakdown of my trauma." Victoria nodded once. "No one is asking for that. But when trauma is used to support public claims that affect institutions, reputations, and policy, scrutiny is inevitable." Meghan's eyes hardened. That's a very comfortable position for someone who's never lived inside that pressure cooker. Victoria didn't rise to the personal remark. She rarely did. "You're right," she said. "I haven't. That's why I rely on documentation." The air in the studio felt heavier now. Even the screens behind them seemed harsher, the colors colder. Victoria flipped a page. "I want to move to another point," she said. "You've said repeatedly that you and Prince Harry were financially cut off without warning. Can you clarify when that happened?" Meghan's answer came quickly this time. "When we stepped back. When we chose independence." Victoria nodded. "In early 2020? Yes. And yet financial disclosures show continued support for a period after that," Victoria said gently. "Security arrangements, transitional funding." Meghan's eyes narrowed. "You're parsing generosity," she said, as if support under duress is the same as support with dignity. Victoria held her ground. "I'm parsing timelines." The word again. Timelines. Meghan's fingers flexed once in her lap before settling again. "You keep saying timelines," she said, "but life isn't a spreadsheet." "No," Victoria replied, "but accountability often is." That landed. Meghan let out a short, humorless laugh. "This is starting to feel less like an interview," she said, "and more like a cross-examination." Victoria didn't deny it outright. "It's a serious program," she said, "and serious claims deserve serious questions." Meghan's tone cooled. "I agreed to speak, not to be interrogated." Victoria's voice softened slightly. "Those two things aren't mutually exclusive." A pause. Meghan looked away for the first time, her gaze drifting toward the glowing table. The blue mug sat untouched between them, props in a conversation that had long stopped being ceremonial. When she looked back up, her voice was controlled, but edged. "You're framing my life as a series of inconsistencies," she said, "when what it really is, a human experience, doesn't fit neatly into your boxes." Victoria nodded slowly. "Human experiences still have sequences." Meghan leaned forward now, breaking her own stillness rule. "And sequences can be weaponized," she said, "especially against women." Victoria didn't interrupt. They ask you to be precise, Meghan continued, her voice gaining force. And then they punish you for every word. Victoria waited until the sentence fully ended. Precision, she said, is not punishment. It's protection from exaggeration, from misunderstanding, from myth. Meghan's eyes flashed. Myth, she repeated. You think my life is a myth? Victoria met her stare evenly. I think parts of the public narrative are contested, she said. And tonight we're examining that the tension was no longer subtle. This wasn't warmth versus hostility anymore. It was control versus structure. Meghan straightened, reclaiming composure like armor snapping back into place. Then let's examine something else, she said coolly. Why women like me are always expected to prove our pain while institutions are given the benefit of doubt. Victoria nodded, acknowledging the point without conceding. That's a fair question, she said, but it doesn't eliminate the need to verify claims. Meghan shook her head once. You're doing exactly what I'm talking about, she said. You're asking me to perform credibility while others remain faceless. Victoria didn't raise her voice. She never did. Institutions don't cry on camera, she said. People do. That's why scrutiny has to be even. Silence. Not awkward, not explosive, just dense. Meghan stared at Victoria, measuring her. Victoria stared back, not challenging, not sympathetic, just present. Finally, Meghan spoke slower now. I came here to speak honestly, she said. But honesty doesn't survive when it's constantly dissected. Victoria replied gently. Honesty is strongest when it does. Meghan's lips pressed together. Her breathing was shallow now, controlled, but faster than before. The realization was settling in. This wasn't a platform she could steer with emotion alone. This wasn't a show that rewarded vulnerability without verification. And for the first time that evening, Meghan looked tired. Victoria glanced briefly toward the camera, then back to Meghan. We're going to take a short pause, she said. When we come back, I want to talk about responsibility, what it means when public figures speak, and what happens when trust fractures. Meghan didn't answer. She just nodded once. But the nod wasn't agreement. It was restraint, and everyone watching could feel it. The breaking point wasn't behind them anymore. It was ahead. There was no music when they returned, just the soft hum of the studio, the glow W of the news site screens, and two women who now understood exactly what this